lovers. I know the internet is actually going crazy around paying to be verified on Twitter, so I thought why not do a bookish video around it. Now, classics are the most evergreen things when we talk about books in general, and here I bring to you the top 10 of the best classics book that I have read till date, which are basically curated from around 100 plus books list that are listed in the must read classics book on Goodreads. The link for this will be down in the description box, so you can go check that out. And if you're ready, let's tune in. On number 10, we have East of Eden by John Steinbeck. Now, this is a story which follows the repetitive history between two different families. One of them is Starks and the other is Hamilton's, whose history seems to be intertwined with each other generation after generations, where the story of the fall of Adam and Eve and the precious rivalry between Cain and Abel is repeated one after the other. Now, Adam Trask moves with his wife to a new land in California to start a fresh life. When they have twins, however, the wife is actually driven to madness, so he is left with the task of raising up both their boys to a manhood by himself. Now, while he is raising the boys, he actually observes that both the boys are having stark contrast in their natures. One of them is developing to be very lovely and thriving boy, where the other is driven by darkness and betrayal kind of an emotion. The book is packed with speculative elements into it, and with the feelings of found family, betrayal, love developing amongst each of the characters makes it a very interesting read for you to read it as a classic fiction. On number 9, we have The Old Man and the Sea by Ernest Hemingway. This is actually a short novel which is considered a part of a modern classic. The story is a tragic narration of a Cuban fisherman who is fishing in the Gulf Stream, and he how basically wants to create the highlight of his career by catching the biggest fish that he has caught till date. Now, on the surface, this might appear to be a very simple story, but it is actually packed with aspects of symbolism into it, where the battle between the fisherman and the fish is actually being reflected upon the struggles of human life and how endurance sometimes become the key but also sometimes become the problem for you. So if you're actually a fan of symbolism but can't deal with a lot of heavy literature, I think this might be the book for you. It's short, crisp, but packed with elements. On number 8, we have A Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. And now, before I actually give you a blurb about the story, I would like to quote these lines by the old grumpy man who is the main protagonist of this book. If I had my way, every idiot who goes around with Merry Christmas on his lips would be boiled with his own pudding and buried with a stake of holy through his heart. Merry Christmas? Bah! Hamburg. And that, my friends, was the old, bitterly, miserly kind of a person, Mr. Scotts. He literally feels that Christmas shouldn't be a special something. It's just like an any other day, ordinary occasion, which should not have a special kind of a treatment. But things start to change when he sees the ghost of his ex-business partner alive in front of him. Not literally alive, more of in a ghost form, and he's giving him warnings that you need to change your attitude before things worsen any further. And if you don't change attitude, it will be too late for you. Now, this is actually a children's classic, so anyone and everyone of all age groups can basically read this classic, especially with Christmas coming along. I think it would be a wonderful time to pick it up. Number 7 brings you a speculative science fiction example of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. This is considered one of the first science fiction novels to be ever written, and it's the story of Victor Frankenstein, where a young scientist basically does some unorthodox kind of experiments to create another sapient form, but he ends up creating a monster. Now, the book has also been converted into a movie, and there are various adaptations of this book, or I should say the editions of this book that exist, the children's editions, adult edition, and a full unabridged edition as well. So depending on the age group, you can find a different version of the same story available for you to read. So I think it's also recommended for all age groups. Number 6 brings us to the most sharp-edged book ever written, Animal Farm by George Orwell. The book actually plays with the human psychology and helps you understand the human behavior, why and how we behave in a certain ways. It is depicted in a form of animal story, but it really revolves around human behavior. The story starts with a farm which has been overtaken by animals who have been mistreated and even overworked for ages. And now they want to conquer the overall farm by proving idealism, different slogans, and showcasing equality for different animals that are living in there. Setting up a judiciary for the new ecosystem that they're living in, they start to create different rules one by one for the society, and they somehow end up creating a total absurd environment which basically is not helpful for any of them to live around in there. I think every adult living today in this state must read this book. This is very important for you to understand the democratic society and also the tyranny aspect of people who actually rule different kingdoms. And not just that, just the overall human behavior as well. If you can't read the book, listen to an audiobook. It's very short. If you can't even listen to the audiobook, just watch the 2-minute summary clipping and you will get the zest of it. But you must consume this story in some form. On number 5, I have something for my witch lovers, which is Macbeth by William Shakespeare. The brave Macbeth general is one day going around and is encountered by 3 different witches who basically forecast that he will be the future king of Scotland. Now, initially, he takes their forecast as something very skeptical kind of a thing, but his lady Macbeth, who is very ambitious, urges him to pursue this further, and she is basically pushing him to do everything and anything in his path to achieve that status. But the whole pursuit is actually driving them paranoid and crazy and is leading to bloodshed, which is basically a violent end to the whole story. So for all my Shakespearean lovers, I think Macbeth would be an amazing fit for you, especially if you are into witchy books too. On number 4, we have one of my most talked about books, which is Emma by Jane Austen. I feel Emma is one of the most liveliest characters that Jane Austen has ever created, even more than the characters of Pride and Prejudice. This is my personal favorite. I know some people do prefer the other over this one, and that's perfectly okay too. Now, Emma is one of those characters who is basically very beautiful, skilled, a little spoiled, I would say, but very witty at times. And she basically loves intermingling with other people's lives and acting as a matchmaker, which sometimes is okay, but other times it does have certain devastating effects that she might have to face and have certain losses too, according to that. This would be a classic piece of literature for the lovers of old England stories that are based around the plot of Countryside. I think you might have something to love over here. Number 3 brings me to the lovers of Greek mythology and poetry, and for this I have the Iliad and the Odysseus by Homer. Now these are listed as 2 separate books on Goodreads. However, the one that I'll be inserting over here, is actually a combined edition of these 2 poems. It's a poetic form of narration around the different stories of Greek mythology. Majorly, the Iliad is actually a story narration of what happened in Troy, the events of the battle, and also what actually occurred between Agamemnon and the warrior Achilles too. The Odysseus can actually be considered the second part or the second installment of it, where it discusses Ulysses Nostro's journey back home once the Troy battle has been won and how Troy basically disintegrated into ashes. Now, out of all the Greek mythology stories that are there, Trojan War is probably one of my personal favorites, so I would definitely recommend you to try this poetic version of it and let me know how you feel about it. Now, I know there are a lot of people who don't necessarily like Greek mythology or Christmas stories, animal stories, or witchy stories. They want something real. For you guys, at number 2, I have The Little Woman by Louisa May Alcott. Now, it is well known that this book is actually inspired by the author's real life, where her father was spending a lot of time with different writers of their age. She and her sisters were busy doing the women's work, the so-called washing, sewing, cleaning, sweeping, baking, and all those other stuff. However, writing this book actually brought her a lot of fame and collection while she was facing a lot of challenges in the personal life, from death, life, war, peace, challenges around family responsibility, and weighing whether she should pursue her ambition and career or go ahead doing what she was always doing. So for the lovers of literature and people who love the concept of books about books, or in this case books about making a book or writing a book, I think this would be a must read. I'll just give you a disclaimer, it's a little chunky if you talk about all the parts this book has. It has a full compilation or different 4 smaller parts that you can go through. And finally, we have made it to the top, and for the first position, I have The Image of Perfection for you. In other words, The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. The story is about a boy named Dorian Gray who basically creates a perfect portrait of himself in the most youthful form, and he observes that gradually he attracts all those powers within himself, being the youthful sensual self, but gradually he divulges into the path of crime, and the deeper he actually sinks into this path of crime and becomes grossier, though he remains himself all youthful and shiny, the portrait becomes gloomier and gloomier, and now he has to basically safeguard that portrait before anyone can see it, and his demonic self presence is out in the public. The book is actually considered a perfect combination of French fiction stories infused with gothic and horror elements into it, making it one of the spookiest read if you are giving it a try. And that, my friends, were the classiest of classics that I wanted to share with you all. Do let me know if you have found your personal favorites among these, or you have a different person favorite. Let me know in the comments down below. And I'll see you in my next video. Until then, keep your coffee strong and your TBRs long. Catch up with you soon. Goodbye.